Productive Pastor 39, the mistakes we all make. What's going on, friends? Back with Productive Pastor Chad Brooks. Stoked to be here. Did you enjoy the last episode? You know, this month we're doing throwbacks to old vintage episodes from Productive Pastor history past. Tell you what, listening to that episode about a study retreat made me just think a lot about that kind of stuff, and so I hope you enjoyed it. Today we've got another vintage episode from back in the past. It's about understanding what mistakes look like, how do we make mistakes, how do we treat ourselves when we make mistakes, and really what do mistakes look like as a pastor, as a ministry leader. Just this morning I was having breakfast with some folks and they were asking a lot of questions about just the different side of being a minister that they were just normal church folks. And so we had a fantastic conversation, and one of the things that one of them said inside of it was, there are so many ways that what you do is so radically different from what we experience in our vocational life. So I decided this mistakes episode is the perfect one to just kind of send through the pipes. Now, if you're enjoying this, I want you just to do one thing. Come over to Facebook, join the Productive Pastor community, be part of that. The link is in the show notes, revchadbrooks.com/PPP/039. It's a great place for ministry leaders who are interested in productivity, living the called life. It's just what all of this means to do it together. So I can't encourage you to do anything besides that. So we're going to jump into this episode. Now, a reminder, just like last time, these are 5-6-year-old episodes. You might hear some calls to action or some links or stuff that aren't there anymore. You know, stuff's changed since then. But let's take in a Productive Pastor time machine trip back to this episode on the mistakes we all make. Now, this is called The Mistakes We All Make, and I'm going to talk about 3 mistakes. And these are mistakes that I'm learning from right now and how I am working through those mistakes. And I imagine that we might come back to the mistakes conversation even more and more. But these are the things that I'm learning from right now, and this is what I am learning from these mistakes. Mistakes are tough things, but what I've realized is that when we make honest-to-goodness mistakes, there's a couple different kinds we can make. We can make the mistakes that we just don't have the knowledge, or there's mistakes that we are willingly making when we feel like we don't have the energy, the resources, the time, the margin, and those sorts of things. And I want to talk about the latter. I want to talk about those mistakes that we make that are not having to do with our ability. Because ultimately, when we make those sorts of mistakes, what we're doing is we're making a sacrifice, that we are willingly sacrificing something. And then so I want to share you the 3 mistakes, but in terms of 3 sacrifices and the fixes that I've learned, and these are the things that I've been telling myself. This is the type of self-leadership I've been having to work through. But the first mistake is this, that we sacrifice our ability to tell the truth. Now, this is a world now where truth is a huge thing. Truth-telling and truth-speaking and fake news and all sorts of that. People are seriously distrustful, and I'm not talking about the truth in that terms. What I'm talking about is the large amount of people that I know I have been meeting that they're turned off to church because of bad experiences with pastors and with clergy. And this is not necessarily like the big, bad, evil pastors that end up doing horrible things. This is just simply, I think sometimes we turn folks off when we just make promises that we can't keep. I'm a very forgetful person. I'm a scattered person. When I'm in seasons like I'm in right now and things are just absolutely nutso busy, I become even more scattered and even more forgetful. But when we sacrifice our ability to tell the truth, so we start making promises that we can't keep, we can let people down. We have this thing to appease what folks need, and we just start making promises and promises. And next thing you know, we've got 25 people we told that hey, I'm going to call you this week. And you just don't have the time to handle with 25 people in that regard. And so there's a fix to this. And the fix is that we learn to pursue greater honesty in things. Now, years ago, I struggled with this so much, and I read about this, and I think it was in Eugene Peterson's memoir, or not his memoir, but it was in Eugene Peterson, The Contemplative Pastor, when someone asks him, and there's some Peterson fans that are in here, and if I get this wrong, just tell me and I'll make sure I change the link in the show notes. But people would ask him to meet with them, and he would simply say, my schedule will not allow me to do this, or they needed him to do something, or like they think about like right now, guys, like, and girls, one of my roles, because I'm literally the only person at the church that has the ability to do it, is I have to pull the dumpster out to the street twice a week. There's so many things that we end up doing, and when we promise somebody, or when we agree to take something on, we're making promises that we can't keep. We need to have greater honesty. And Eugene Peterson's solution to this was when someone would ask him about something, he would just simply say, my schedule won't permit it, because he had his schedule lined out. Now, the fixed schedule is something a lot of people talk about right now, something that Gary Newhoff teaches in his High Impact Leaders course. But just saying, my schedule won't allow. People will take that for an answer. And think about just the power of just learning to say, I really can't do that right now. And sometimes we're terrified of saying, I can't do that right now. But when we don't say that and we make promises we can't keep, and it hurts folks. It hurts folks deeply. I know I've done that lately, and it makes me really sad. Maybe what we should offer doing is, here's what I can do for you right now. But there's also, talk about Carey Nieuwhof earlier, he has this article that has trended Facebook for the last couple of years. Carey was on The Productive Pastor years ago before his own podcast, in episode 27, but this article he wrote gets shared constantly, and it's very controversial. People really get in a twist over this, but it's called How Pastoral Care Stunts the Growth of most churches, and I know that that's just a hotbed thing to even bring up, but what he says is that, we all have a limit. Like, we have a span of care that we are able to care for people. And, for some of us, we might be in churches to where we're well within our span of care, and we love doing that. And you might be the type of pastor that loves pastoral care, that loves these conversations, that loves pouring into people in these moments of their life. Or you might be somebody who's really not good at it or doesn't care for it, and it might be just incredibly draining to you. But what we all have to realize is, when we end up just losing our ability to tell the truth and making promises we can't keep, that we're getting ourselves into trouble. And the tension point that we have is that we have to be this superhero for other people. But when we do that, and when we consistently get in situations where we're backed off to where we don't have time for our most important jobs, where we don't have enough time for sermon preparation or for leadership or for vision or those things that we know we're supposed to be doing deep, we're letting the needs of one person overcome the needs of the entire church. And that's tough for us. But our ability to tell the truth, just the ability to be honest with people and say, this is what I'm able to do for you. And we this is not leaving people in the dust. This is not dropping folks off. This is just genuinely being honest about what we have the ability to do right now. And this is where you raise up other folks who are able to bear a lot of this burden. Because here's the thing: if you're really doing down and dirty and gnarly and nasty gospel ministry, you're meeting people who you might be the only person they've ever met in their life that has it together. And I know I don't feel like I have it together right now, but when I hear the other stories I hear, I'm like, okay, wow, I might be the most adult person this person has ever met, which is laughable. But that's the case, and so we realize our role and our place in that. But that first sacrifice, that first mistake is we sacrifice our ability to tell the truth. The second sacrifice is this, that we're the mistake we make, and we sacrifice our best. And when we get to a point when we're willing to spend an inordinate amount of time at what we are absolutely worst at, and when we get super busy and we find ourselves just having to do what we're bad at. And here's the thing: if I'm bad at something, it's going to take me 10 times as long as if I'm good at it. Or if I'm not passionate about something, it's going to take me 10 times as long to do it as the things that I am passionate about. So it's realizing what we're good at and what we're not good at and what we're bad at and where that's fitting into our schedule. And we fix it by just simply having greater awareness that we are willing to take the small losses in favor of the big wins. J.R. Forresteris, who's been on the show a couple of times, I was talking with him about this very thing about a month and a half ago when he came and stayed with me at the house. And one of the things he says, there's just a lot of stuff that he just doesn't do, and he feels I probably should be doing it. And there's people that think I should be doing these things, but I'm just not going to do it. are willing to take small losses in favor of the big wins. That's that fix. And the final mistake we make is when we sacrifice our boundaries. Okay? When we are become willing to sacrifice our own personal boundaries. You know, where any personal time we have will be ate away so much till we find out there is no person left. I'm going to say that again, that when any personal time will be ate away until there is no person left. I was talking with a friend of mine who says I get text messages from my church all the time at 11 o'clock at night. And I told him, I said, you know why you get text messages at 11 o'clock at night from your church? And he said, I don't know why. I said, because you answer text messages at 11 o'clock from your church. Like, our boundaries are a sacrifice that we just cannot be willing to make. And the fix of this is for us to understand that there's a greater foundation, that we have to have a very strong conversation of boundaries. And this is a place where I've been personally learning so much, especially in the last few weeks as during Lent. But it's this: our boundaries fall because our foundation is shallow. Our boundaries fall because our foundation is shallow. That our boundaries begin with self-imposed boundaries. That's the thing, is if we are not a person who practices discipline, who practices these things in our own personal life, we're going to have a very, very hard time making them corporate or making them church-wide or institutional or whatever word you want to look at. Because think about that. You think of your self-leadership. We know how important self-leadership is. Lately, I started using an app called Moment. I talk about it a lot in the Productive Pastor community on Twitter, but it shows me how much time I'm on my phone a day. And let me tell you what, that has rocked my world just absolutely. Just absolutely, it's rocked my world. One of the things I did, I deleted Facebook off of my phone. So if I've been quiet online, especially on Facebook, or not in the Productive Pastor community as much, I try to sit down 3 times a day and get in there from desktop. She says, I deleted Facebook. Y'all, I gained back, like, I'm not joking. I promise you, I'm not joking here. When I started tracking my phone usage time, I gained back 2.5 hours of my day. Like, I was literally just screwing around on my phone for 2.5 hours a day. I've gotten my phone use under like 45 minutes. I'll tell you what, the peace that brings me is astounding. And I've taken that and I've applied that to other areas of my life that are stressing me out. I've made the decision to just pull it out, to not worry about it, to not obsess over constantly checking things and looking at things. It's just been wild. You know, a couple years ago, I actually uploaded the sermon to Productive Pastor and let it fall through. But it's called Crashing is Not the Same as Resting. I'll link to that in the show notes. But one of the things I shared was, and it's my sermon with this church, and I said, I need y'all to hold me accountable. I've been watching YouTube at night before I go to bed for like an hour in bed, and it's making me not rest as well. And then people will occasionally ask me like how I'm doing on that, and I'll tell them, well, the funny thing is, like 2 weeks after I preached that message, like my iPad, which I had for years, it has taken falls upon falls. It fell in the way it's fallen many times before and completely shattered the screen. And I've had almost a year and a half now without an iPad, and I'll tell you what, it has made my life a lot better. I love it. So, I mean, thinking about sleep and exercise, like right now, I had a conversation with my dad once to where he told me in times of stress that we need to double down on devotion, double down on our rest, and double down on our exercise, just to take care of our bodies and our souls inside of that. And that just takes a tremendous amount of self-leadership to get to the place where we can do that. So, friends, these are mistakes we make. And the mistake always comes down to our willingness to sacrifice things that are incredibly crucial to us being healthy and whole leaders and pastors and ministry professionals, that our folks desperately need us to be as healthy as we can be. So those are the mistakes that we all make. I'd love to hear your feedback on the ones that you struggle with, or maybe your additions to it. I mean, tweet them to me at Rev Chad Brooks. I'd love to see and hear and interact with you on those. It is always a really weird blast from the past when I look back and listen to those older episodes. That's one of the reasons I'm sharing them this month. But this one, why don't you do me a favor? Done a little bit of this on the Productive Pastor community, but hit me up on Twitter or hit me up in the community. If you've got older episodes that you remember from the 6-year-long run we had back in the day, and you want to hear those again, let me know. And remember, I'm doing all this to kind of prep out for a fantastic spring here in 2023 in Productive Pastor. So, Chad Brooks here. As always, I appreciate you being part of this. You are one of the reasons that this is so great. So come hang out in the community, and I will see you back in the next episode.